Institutionalized persuasion can have drastically different effects depending on the personal meaning attributed to the experience. When comparing initiation with abusive methods of reform, both rely on similar methods, but for different lengths of time, different purposes, among different populations, and they are applied within different cultural contexts. So I'm saying a lot in here. There's a lot implied in that paragraph. I'll read the list. These are generalizations I'm making here. Like I say, I'm not an expert on indigenous societies, but from what I've read, some generalizations that are fairly safe to make. The process of initiation is at least meant to facilitate, well, that's the wrong way to say it. Generalizations I feel comfortable making, let me just say that. In initiation, in indigenous societies, generally we'll find a universality of experience. Abusive reform, and I'm not saying that residential programs are abusive. I'm just saying where there is an experience of abuse, where there is a treatment method that has the potential for the impairment of development, that is abusive. Where you find that, rather than everybody in your village going through initiation, when they reach a certain point in their physical development, you'll have the alienating experience of, I've been through a program, nobody else in my school has been through a program, and I'm an alien because the world I just came out of, nobody has any comprehension that anything like that even exists. Or maybe they do, but maybe they have misconceptions of what, oh, you went to a program and it must have really helped you because I've heard that's a really good program. Well, that can be very alienating. I keep going on tangents here. Initiation is triggered by the physical development of a child. Abusive reform is triggered by your failure as a person to develop properly. Initiation is marked, celebrated by the community. Abusive reform is marked by stigma. In general, initiation is essential to entering the realm of adulthood in our human history, going back for thousands of years. Abusive reform disrupts the maturation. That's another big word. I don't use that in my normal speaking. Initiation tends to be rather brief compared to the length of time in a residential program. It is a sacred experience in these cultures. Abusive reform is drawn out, brief, sacred, and celebrated as opposed to prolonged, profane, and hidden. Initiation, it can be intensely painful. And I won't go into detail, but some of the initiation ordeals I've read about are just like, what in the world? I mean, we're talking cannibalism in some of them, and I'm not an advocate for cannibalism. I'm just saying it's not like, feathers in your hair and you're wearing moccasins on the plane. We're talking serious altered states of consciousness through pain.
Walking on burning coals.
Yeah, like I said, yeah. Yeah. So, but this pain is it's experienced in a mythological way, in a sacred way, as opposed to a meaningless way. In general, initiation establishes meaning for the individual. Abusive reform has the potential to lead to trauma. Initiation, the purpose is to transmit a consciousness to a child. Abusive reform, if you grow from your experience of pain, that's great. But I call it accidental growth. And again, that's a contentious subject, so I'll just go to the next slide too. Okay, so I have important big capital letters because one of the experts I sent this to for feedback, he said, Marcus, Your definition of institutionalized persuasion implies that it is always abusive. So I have in big capital letters, institutionalized persuasion is not inherently abusive. The context has everything to do with whether or not it impairs your development. So another thought experiment. We can read this next paragraph thinking of initiation ordeals and thinking in terms of troubled teen industry. This quote, I think this is one of the most important paragraphs in my studies of the troubled teen industry. Edgar Schein was an expert who studied communist brainwashing methods in the 1950s, wrote the book Coercive Persuasion. In 1961, there was a symposium held by the National Institute of Mental Health and the Federal Bureau of Prisons, how to translate the technology of brainwashing into the reform of prisoners and adolescent delinquents. So this paragraph is from a publication about that symposium. He says, the new behaviors and attitudes will be learned as a basic solution to the problem of how to survive in the inflexible environment. And they will be learned through imitation of and identification with the human models which are provided in the environment. When you reduce someone to a survival level, your consciousness will change. Playing on that human tendency is really one of the foundation stones of coercive residential treatment. This is where we get into my multi-dimensional map. I wish we had a light on this. Maybe. How would? I mean, if it was like this. Would you hold it just for a second? Okay, so this was supposed to be my comic relief moment in the presentation because, as you can see, this is Humpty Dumpty, who had a great fall. And his legs go up and down. This is a McDonald's. His legs go up and down and his face changes when he pushes his legs. So this is a way of describing how, in our definition of psychological abuse, one of the characteristics was complex psychological abuse. I won't try to define that phrase right now, but one of the points I really want to make is it is incredibly difficult to describe how complex all the dynamics work together in a totalistic setting. This map describes 81, and I think it's 81, I'm not good at math. I think it describes 81 questions or scenarios or dynamics. So, are your arms getting tired?
No.
Okay, thank you. So right here I have, how do systems of little green circle affect little orange triangle when controls of the big circle are imposed through the yellow triangle? So, what I've done here, I've taken several theories of coercion and put them together to make a sentence. And each different color represents represents a different theory of coercion. That's a big generalization that isn't true, per se, but that's what it is. It's a concept. It's a poetic expression. This blue circle represents the work, to me, of Robert J. Lifton, who really emphasized the importance of controlling the milieu in communist brainwashing. And I've taken the liberty of emphasizing the social milieu, the social environment, and controlling the social environment. And I have identified the three most important aspects in that control as being the control of connection, communication, and information. This yellow triangle represents the process that an individual goes through in the process of being persuaded.